Hi, my name is John. Thank you for watching American Enlightenment. Today we're going to be talking about a variety of topics that are in the news. Some of them, to me, are very troubling. Veteran of the U.S military. I'll need his opinion on some of this and see where our country's going and what you guys in the audience think about this as well. Jay, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
Question for you. What do you think about like the thing with the tariffs that we're doing with President Trump's got the tariffs going right now?
It's kind of hard to put that into a succinct sentence, but essentially what I think about them is, in theory, they're sound, and in theory that they're going to work, but in execution, it doesn't seem like everybody's on board with it at the moment.
Let me ask you this. How do you, in the short run, it's definitely creating havoc with the markets, okay, and it's, causing wild swings.
Right. It's several $1 trillion swings.
Yeah, several trillion, exactly. But at the same point in time, a lot of these countries have popped up, and so now they're willing to negotiate. And I was, frankly, I was kind of naive and unaware of a lot of this. I didn't know that, for example, like take China, for example, that we push goods into their countries. They charge us more money to bring our goods in than we do to bring their goods in here. And then also the Chinese have a bad habit of taking our products or products from Europe or wherever, right? And re-engineering them and knocking them off and making their own and breaking patent laws, international patent laws. They're actually pretty famous for that. I know that O'Leary, the famous guy from Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, he actually thinks that Trump hasn't gone far enough with China.
What would be far enough, did he say?
No, he didn't really elaborate. He said he'd take measures further. But if you look at it in a lot of aspects, I think President Trump is correct. They have been ripping us off, right? But then they're not the only country. You have the European Union. I didn't know that like France had a lot of restrictions on things that we can and cannot send, that, otherwise it's escalated up. So once I started thinking about this, about tariffs, and you think about the decline of manufacturing in America, right? Then it makes perfect sense. Because if you can't sell goods abroad, right? And you're manufacturing, you're just relying on a domestic market, but you're relying on a domestic market here, and goods are being flooded in from other countries that are cheaper. People are just going to buy the cheaper goods, and then your company, your factory goes out of business.
Right. Essentially, you can't control what people want to buy. I mean,
they're
they
going
get to choose.
What they're going to do is, I hate to say this, people are going to buy with their pocketbook. Now, they're not looking at something, made in America, that's good for America. Yeah, it's about $180 more. This is $180 cheaper. I'll buy this. It's the same thing, and it's just as good.
Yeah, I mean so I guess I would just like to know what the actual goals, like a clearly defined goal for the tariffs are for the American people. What we're able to do.
I would say, to answer your question, what he's after is to bring manufacturing back. Now, there's a lot of promises from big companies that are promising to come back here and build. South Korea did initially kicked off and said they're planning on some unworldly amount. I think it was 200 billion or 20 billion. It was a big number. Okay, most likely we talk about factories, probably 200 billion of investments to actually put factories to bring manufacturing here. They'll own the plant, but they'll be hiring American workers, of course. Okay. What's funny is we've gotten a bad reputation around the world. I thought something on a social media platform. It starts with a T, and it showed American workers with Chinese music basically in the background, and we're a bunch of American workers at workstations, just like how, like, you know,
At a warehouse?
it was basically their version. They're laughing at us
Oh.
about how we would be a joke doing it because we're fat and lazy. And
Oh.
they've had everybody in the video was chunked out, you know.
Just global misperceptions of Americans.
Well, yes and no to a point, but we got a lot of problems in this country. One is the food supply, but that's a whole nother hour. I can go into that about how we're being poisoned.
I can talk about soil depletion for a long time.
Oh yeah, we can. We're on the same page. And China's now kicked off what is 145%, or we've kicked off 145% on them, and China said they're reciprocating with the same amount. Okay. Where do you think this ends? Because I mean, China's got all the factories because we allowed I'd say since the 70s, allowed businesses to move out of this country.
Yeah, literally since 1975. That's
And
when
then
we started rolling back tariffs.
And then we allowed cheap products from other countries in here, which I had no clue that they weren't even paying a tariff that's as high as if we send goods to them, which makes no sense to me at all.
So is that like a reciprocal tariff? So we charge them 145%, they charge us 145%?
I think that's the new term now. See, this tariff thing is totally brand new to me.
Right, okay.
But what's not brand new to me is watching the decline of the United States, right? And I mean, the Michigan and all the places that had manufacturing of vehicles are called the Rust Belt because all these factories are rusting, they're decayed.
Right.
We lost everything, which is ridiculous.
I mean, there's a whole history lesson in here where you're exactly right that for a long time the U.S. was one of the largest manufacturing producers in the world, exporting, you know, the most steel and just manufactured products like car parts and everything to everywhere. And then in the 70s, into the Reagan administration, they started rolling back tariffs and started promoting free trade, which essentially just allowed the market to determine its own value.
I think it actually goes back further than Reagan. I think it goes back to Kissinger and initially the initial meetings with China. And think about it at that time period. After Nixon opened up trade with China, I mean, initially in the early 70s and the late 60s, I mean, you could lose your life traveling to China as an American, right? If you could get into the country. But they were an iron-fisted country, staunch communism, and then when the Soviets went away, now we have adjusted communism, just like you have adjusted capitalism for our neighbors up north, right? This is adjusted communism. This is communism and capitalism mixed together.
Would that be a whole different type, like a whole different category of government?
That's up to somebody with probably a college degree that I don't have.
Fair enough.
But I would say you're probably right. But but if you think about it, I mean, what I find interesting about their system, and actually brilliant, is their government loaned money to citizens to build factories, and the government became a partner on that factory. And you see how it started adjusting? It went from agricultural, version of communism to an industrial version of it, but an industrial version with a capitalist twist, right? So in other words, the government benefits and the people benefit too. But at the same point in time, the communist government there is so I don't know if I want to use the words repressive or so controlling that, I mean, if you get you have social points, that if you lose social points, you can't ride the bus.
Oh, right.
There's no real free speech. I mean, if people like in China did what they were doing at Harvard and Columbia University, they'd probably all be in prison.
I just remember like a couple of years ago or a few years ago, back when lockdown started happening, was it was it Beijing? I think it was Beijing. The whole city essentially was rioting, and then the Chinese government came and shut down the internet and essentially locked down the whole city. And personally, I haven't really heard many updates since then. And that was literally just a group response to the government's actions. And the response was Hong Kong. Yeah, I wasn't sure what city it was.
Yeah, this is the kind of mentality we're dealing with, right? That's why I wanted to delve into that. So now we're kind of poking the dragon, right? They have a symbiotic relationship with us. I mean, you can't go anywhere and get a kid's meal and get a little toy for your kid in the meal. It's made in China.
Right.
Okay. Or, you have clothing that's made somewhere in some Asian country, because we don't make clothing anymore. We used to make our own clothing here. We made everything here. During the pandemic, if we didn't learn our lesson, I don't think we're ever going to learn this. When the pandemic hit, and we both know we're in hazmat, right? You could not find PPE, personal protective equipment, medical gloves, respirators. It was like gold. And China basically just said, we're not shipping it anymore out, we're keeping it for ourselves. Right. Because they had a virus problem that became everybody else's problem. Okay. And none of this makes any sense on a strategic level. Why are our governments allowed this? Presidents of the past and what have you, president after president allowing companies to go. The one thing that I do believe that I liked what Biden did was that there was a chip manufacturing plant in Taiwan that made like high grade chips, but we couldn't make them here because we basically let them have it.
Yeah, we don't have the infrastructure.
We don't have the infrastructure, but now we've got a chip plant. Okay. Why on God's green earth did we allow that to happen?
What, the Taiwan to have a monopoly?
Have a monopoly at the same point in time, allow ourselves to be strategically vulnerable, that the whole world basically depends on that one plant in Taiwan to pop out chips. But we didn't have the capability at all. And what happened during the pandemic, when the trades shut down from the chip manufacturer in Taiwan, cars started. Remember, the cars went up in price. You couldn't buy a brand new car because they couldn't manufacture them because they couldn't get the chips from the plant to put in the cars.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that it wasn't a problem until it was a problem. Like, who could have foreseen COVID happening?
I have a lot of theories on that.
Fair enough.
Okay, and I don't think COVID just happened out of the clear blue.
Well, yeah, definitely something on that scale. It definitely needs.
I think that was designed. In my opinion, COVID was a strategic move by a foreign power to shift world economics in their favor.
I can see how you would think that. Personally, I'm a fan of coincidence and just government efficiency being able to capitalize on something like that, because the U.S. at the time, we were not prepared for it and we did not capitalize on it. Other governments, 100% capitalized.
That brings me to another thing. We see the movies, right? And we're on tariffs, but we're going to be, this all connects.
Circle back.
We always expect the government to have these like top secret labs. They can shoot a laser beam and knock an asteroid out before it hit the planet, because we're the badasses of the planet.
Right.
Right. I think COVID showed exactly where we're at.
Yeah.
It looked almost like something out of Dr. Strangelove. It was like more like like, what do we do now? There's actual like real deadly disease that got let loose by accident, or it was intentionally released. That's my version of it.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Well, that's my theory. But you have so many different aspects, since this is such a complex country. And now we're 5 years after COVID, or 4.5 or what after COVID, and now we're re-engaged with them. I mean, COVID hit in the first cases of COVID, I do believe, were September of 2019. That's the first news reports I saw of a strange pneumonia. I was following it very closely because one of the things I do is disease control. And I remember my ex at the time thought it was insane for like being glued to the TV. I said, this is going to turn into something. And it sure did.
Yeah, my grandparents were actually the exact same way.
Yeah.
And it definitely turned into something.
Yeah, it definitely turned into something. But now we're dealing with the post-COVID era, right? It's after COVID, and you have a huge economy in China. I mean, it's 1 billion people ish,
Yeah,
or 2
roughly.
billion, or I mean,
It's not at 2. I want to say it's like 1.3, 1.2. I'm not sure the exact
I
number.
think it's gone up. It probably jumped up a couple 100,000 while we're talking.
If we are to trust their reporting numbers, then yes.
To me, like, why were we doing so much business with a country that won't allow us to send our goods there? But when we send something there, they take it apart and analyze it and make their own version of it and break patent laws left and right, international patent laws, and then throw their own knockoff on the market and basically, tell the U.S. tough luck, or whatever country invented the product, because it's the Chinese. Like Germany is a great manufacturing power in Europe. I mean, France. I mean, all of them have their own little gigs, right? But at the same point, where do you think? Where was the logic in this? Do you think it was greed
I mean,
on politicians' parts that allowed this to happen?
I don't know about politicians specifically, but the world is ran on money. Like everything we do has to come back around to money, and especially since the whole world, barring a couple of countries, is ran on capitalism, supply and demand. If you create demand, you create the money. If you limit the supply, you can charge however much you want.
We'll see where it ends up with China. But my thing is, I think that one thing I think we should be looking at here in this country, I think we should be looking at upping our fuel production for fossil fuels. Yeah,
We're already the largest producer of fossil fuels in the world.
Well, we need to drop prices because the prices are accelerating up. If we're going to bring manufacturing back, the Chinese, like, what was it? They threw up a skyscraper in like a month.
Yeah, and that's the thing about their Chinese manufacturing is, like you said, the government subsidized them. The government put in all their money, they put in all that effort, and the government gets returns on that effort. So for the U.S. to do that as well, we would have to, one, have a clearly defined goal, like, does the U.S. want to be the producer of the toys in McDonald's meals?
I think you hit the nail on the head where I'm going with this. Why didn't we follow? It was working for them. Why didn't we just follow the same model? I mean, what's funny in this country, and this is so crazy, during the Biden administration, $13 billion went into building charging stations, right? Remember Build It Back Better? I don't see very many things that have been built back better.
Right.
But they spent $13 billion on charging stations, and I guess they whipped up about a dozen of them.
Yeah, and I know it takes a lot of time.
What a joke.
The production capability is definitely lower than what I would want. And definitely, like, what Biden did was trying to bring energy production, like renewable energy, to the U.S. and to increase electric vehicles in the U.S. and the charging stations and everything. And the administrative controls that go into that probably take some time to implement, plus the contracts that go into that, and then getting the developmental rights, because everything is owned privately. Like, you have to actually negotiate with these people to build these things there, versus in other countries like China, they can just build it.
How could you screw off $13 billion?
You got me. I've never even...
And at the same point in time, you look at these charging stations, you look at anything, components on a lot of things, like, say in your car or my car, they're all foreign made. Right. Nothing's made here. Yeah. Which brings me back to another conversation about what disintegrated America. Okay. Back when my mom and her generation, you could become a widow, waltz on down to Sears and Roebuck, get a job there, pay for groceries, and take care of a family working at Sears and Roebuck. Right. And all of a sudden, Sears and Roebuck basically turned into minimum wage, and now it's blowing away. It's out the door. I guess maybe there's a couple left, or who knows, it's gone by now. But we've turned into a service economy of low wages.
Pretty much.
Where both parents have to work. Okay. And Toby went out and did street interviews with his crew. And I've done interviews with the homeless myself, right? One of the things that's a reoccurring theme that they all talk about is how there was trauma in the childhood, a divorce, there's only one parent, there was some kind of chaotic situation in the formative years. and the rest of the years were messed up.
Right.
Okay, the divorce rates in this country have skyrocketed. Okay, um, wouldn't it be better if we went back to an economy where, say, for example, you worked a 40-hour week, could buy a house, and the wife didn't have to work; she could take care of the kids. Not to be sexist, it could be the other way around. Who cares, right? Somebody's got to be with the kids. And wouldn't that be just better for, because kids are the future of humanity, okay? And kids are the future of our kids. American kids are the future of America.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And we're supposed to be leading the way for the planet. We're supposed to be like the country. Yeah, we make mistakes. We're morphing. We're developing. But now I actually feel empathy for President Trump. He's trying to do everything at once, and everybody's free. But the thing is, my thing is, this is getting people to the table to renegotiate these deals, getting them into some type of business agreement. I get my hats off to him on that. He's actually pulled off quite a bit.
Threats will do that.
Well, at the same point in time, if you have like a bunch of, let's put it this way: if you're doing an analogy, a bunch of friends come over to your place, they're eating all your food, and you ask, "Hey, man, I'm kind of getting low and stuff. But would you cool if we had dinner at your house?" Like, no, and they kept making excuses, and this happened year after year, and you were fronting the tab for all their food. You wouldn't allow that, would you?
I guess it depends on how we define a friendship and how this analogy.
It doesn't sound like a good friendship to me.
To me, if I invite a friend over, that's me implying that they can have whatever that I offer, which is food in my fridge and everything.
Yeah.
So that's to me personally, but I understand the analogy when it's related to a country, if it's like a professional connection. So like, I like an office kitchen, if there's like a shared communal area and somebody just goes in there and takes everything out of it, then yes, I would be upset by that. But if it was my own home that I invited them into, that I offered.
If you pictured a public market and there were vendors there and they're all lined up in vendors, and let's say everybody's making sweaters, homemade sweaters, right? And one vendor got told, you can't sell these, you have to sell this at this price, you have to sell another, and the guy at the end can sell it the cheapest. And all of a sudden, every time you're going to the public market, you're taking home, most of your sweaters come home with you, and the guy that's selling the cheapest is, rotating box after box after box.
Just automatically, I would need to know what the criteria was to determine who gets to sell what for what amount.
Well, that's what the T word, tariffs, represents, because I never really thought about it. In the 70s and the 80s is really about when Nixon opened the doors to China. And we shouldn't, and I agree with that, we should have. But I think at some point in time, it's like your friends are taking advantage of you. Right? I think a lot of our friends around the world took advantage of us.
I mean, I think
we go to foreign countries, we spill American blood. We send products and goods when they have natural disasters. But at the same point in time, when we had problems here repetitively, fires, hurricanes, foreign aid from across the pond, anybody sending anything to us?
I think that's a oversimplified perception of that, because with sending aid and help to somebody else, at least to me, like I have a certain set of principles. If I offer help to somebody, it's because I want to help them. I don't expect anything in return, but I completely understand why somebody would want that and expect
I think we live on a pretty small speck of dust in a big cosmos, right? A big universe. And we all need to pull together.
Right.
Right. But your friends are coming over. Can I get a beer? Can I grab a quick snack? What have you? Hey, and you're at their place. I'm kind of low on that right now. I, prefer you don't. I don't have anything, blah, blah, blah. In other words, they don't reciprocate the positive vibes.
Right.
Okay, let's go with that. I can kind of see where this has been going for a lot of years. Tariffs. Okay, so the tariffs are going, in my opinion, things are going to get pretty ugly. Yep, for a while. What's your spin? I mean, do you think that this could spark some wars?
Like armed conflicts?
Yes.
Potentially. I mean, they do say, money is the root of all evil, and war is. I'll stay away from that. But as far as the tariffs go, the potential ramifications globally kind of just depends on what everybody's goal is at the time. So, like, if I had a clearly defined goal from these tariffs, and nothing so abstract as simply bring manufacturing back to America, to me, that doesn't really say anything to me. The goal is supposedly to bring jobs and then income to American citizens. And the goal of that income is to improve our lives. And so if we have a higher income, we can afford better housing. We can afford more goods and services from other countries that are also tariffing us. But in the process of applying these tariffs to other countries, they're simply reciprocating in kind their tariffs. So nobody actually has a clearly defined goal here. So I guess if the tariffs had a goal in mind, say like a 5 to 10 year plan to bring manufacturing back, to increase the average earner wages, because we've been in a wage stagnation period for several years now, and the housing crisis of not enough housing, too many people, and the cost of housing is already exorbitantly high as it is. So if the goal in some way was to make life in general easier for Americans, like American citizens and not just American corporations and businesses, then my spin on that would be positive. But as it stands now, the goal is too abstract, it's too vague, and there's too much reciprocation going on. So ultimately, it is going to, I don't know if it'll ever erupt into an armed conflict of any kind, but I do see a lot of restrictions going on that could negatively affect everybody's lives in the world.
One of the things that I just caught in the news, that Hong Kong said that they're not going to accept U.S. mail and not send mail out to the United States. I just caught from the Gossip Girl, right, from Shoot the Messenger, that on the T-word platform, that Chinese manufacturers are actually trying to sell their products direct for ridiculously like low money volume. What they sell it for, they just want to like keep fed, right? And all of a sudden, there's it's just low volume. One of the things I kind of noticed, that since China has adjusted communism, they've really built up their military.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to they did. It's not like they invested it into alternative energy to get rid of their coal plants, which I think they did some, but they sure seem to have a lot of badass toys.
Yeah, I mean, when you got that much money and that large of a population, it has to go somewhere.
But where they're getting the money from is because they're selling sweaters cheaper than anybody, and also now they're partnered with those factories because it's adjusted communism. How do they break the money down? And now the government's getting a lot of money. So at some point in time, somebody needs to put the brakes on this. I just hope that President Trump's successful with this whole thing, because it's quite a gambit. But it'd sure be nice if we could do some drill baby drill, get the gas down to about 2 something a gallon, and that would probably drop a lot of things here domestically
in the short term, for sure. But there's like the U.S. and many countries around the world have been trying to renew resources and production capability into renewable energy,
which
which
not much success.
I mean, it depends on how you define success. Like everything is heading in that direction. Like we're capable of it. We're getting there. Certain countries are emphasizing hydrogen, like learning more.
That's my opinion. That's the way to go.
Yeah. So there's a lot of countries developing that. There's some countries leaning more into nuclear renewable energy, which is way safer than a lot of people give it credit for.
It actually, the technology's changed so much, especially now that you have robots. And you have AIs and automation that can control the plants. It's not like grandfather's nuclear plant,
right? Exactly.
Like where basically the place is melting into the core of the earth. France and the European Union, what do you expect them to do? It'd be nice if everybody had the same tariff, like 10%, not like where it was all or they restrict, you can't sell cars here, if we're gonna accept your goods, then accept our stuff as well. And it's only fair. It's supposed to be fair trade, right?
Well, I mean, the word is used there, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you see a lot of like, pictures of like the Middle East, and you'll see a Toyota truck, cruising along with a machine gun rack in the back or something like that. And then once in a while you look over and there's a Chevy truck or a Ford. I mean, granted, it's not like what I would like our trucks to be used for, but they're there. I mean, at the same point in time, I mean, it shouldn't be where if you live in China, you're trying to buy an American car because you want to have a Chevy Corvette or something like that, that it costs like, an exorbitant sum of money, because that's going to deter you. You're just going to just buy a knockoff brand that's right there, that's probably just as good, because they re-engineered all the technology from the Corvette anyhow.
Right.
So I think that's the big beef that American business has right now. There's a lot of things that need to level the playing field. So, in my opinion, I think we should get fuel production, get gas down while this whole thing's going on. And if we're going to, this is my spin, right? If we're going to be doing manufacturing here, why not have it where all the money that Doge is saving and put that into to building plants, but not giving it to, say, South Korea or somebody that's coming here from like one of the car manufacturers. They're going to build more plants here, but if somebody wants to build a plant like whatever it is, and one of the reasons why Solar City failed is because the Chinese just made cheaper solar panels, and that whole thing went bust. And all the different sides of the aisle were all throwing their arms up and see the government. Well, it would have worked, but the problem is the tariffs. If you make the goods cost the same as what's being built here, if you apply a tariff to it, all of a sudden it levels the playing field quite quickly. So I'm all for it. All right, so South America. You been following the news much down there?
I have not, honestly.
How about the deportations?
I've been hearing some things about that. Some people going to El Salvador, not coming back.
Yeah, no, going to El Salvador, not coming back. But I find it interesting that out of the clear blue, that we have formed relationships just very quickly with prime ministers and presidents or whatever their title are. And all of a sudden we have like a carte blanche to send any prisoner to El Salvador, which doesn't sound like a very fun place to be.
No, it doesn't.
Now those guys, I mean, their heads down like that, and they must have some pretty for those guards to be wanting to do that. These must be some pretty violent people.
We would assume. We have nothing to go off of other than what they tell us.
Well, a different gangs in South America have to rule by the law of Club and Fang, because they're dealing with it's a gangster's world. Okay. And for anybody who starts doing anything like, it's because of, if you look at the Chicago gangsters of the 20s, there was plenty of murders.
Right.
And this involved liquor, prohibition. The late, well, I'm sorry, not the 20s, the 30s, when prohibition hit, right? Tell me, what year was prohibition? Thanks. Usually I remember these things.
It end 20s into the mid 30s.
No,
around there?
1920 to 1933.
1920?
Yeah.
Wow.
So for 13 years, the country had no liquor, theoretically, unless you had a Canadian neighbor and they threw you a bottle across the border.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a famous family who got into politics. They were booze runners. They used to take their yacht to Canada, and yeah, they seem to make a lot of money by doing that. Yeah, it's just happened to be getting it down here.
The principle of free trade.
When South America and the culture that cocaine and now fentanyl has created, you've created organizations down there that are armed to the teeth. These people are very inventive. I mean, I have to hand it to them. I mean, who would have thought of making a homemade submarine?
Yeah.
Putting basically a GPS guidance system in the thing, along with some boat, like as a tracer thing,
Hmm.
or manning the thing with 3 people and having a submarine uh, go across international waters, including the United States. And they've been doing it. They've been flying like homemade model planes.
Hmm.
I've heard all kinds of like stuff,
Yeah,
right?
that's the power of a clearly defined goal.
But what that kind of goes back to is um, the reason why this became so wildly popular in those countries is because you had depressed economies and people had no opportunities. And young men growing up or whatever, I mean, they see an opportunity and it's making money, they're going to do it.
Right.
So, but then it also this is not a race thing or a culture. It's basically a gangster culture thing. If somebody steps out of line, they get it.
Hmm.
And now you have like a huge organizations in South America and Mexico,
Hmm.
and they're. It reminds me of like how the mafia morphed in this country, morphed into actually legitimate businesses
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. I don't know what they do at this point,
Hmm.
but you don't hear about them anymore.
Right.
But you sure hear a lot about illegal drugs coming in, and you hear all these fancy, names that come from South America,
Hmm.
and you hear about, and you see people's lives being ruined. There's a lot of young men, women, young men, people, murders. I mean, all kinds of crazy nonsense going on. And at the same point in time, but these are countries that there's no industries there
Hmm.
to speak of.
I see.
That's the industry.
Right. Yeah. They need some way to make money, and that's the most obvious way to do it for
The
some people.
agriculture they sell to other countries for because they export because it's cheaper, that kind
Hmm.
of thing. But at the same point in time, fentanyl hit the scene,
Mm.
and fentanyl is in my book, and I'll stand by this, is a Chinese invention.
Really, I honestly haven't heard anything about that.
But fentanyl, I mean, the Chinese we got this trade thing going with them. And then all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, that now they're sending us fentanyl. This is,
Hmm.
5, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I guess it started.
Hmm.
And then the DA kept making this version of it illegal. So they would change the chemical formula just a little bit.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it would come over. Why didn't the Chinese authorities just, I mean, you're talking about a country that is so strongly controlled
Hmm.
that you can walk down the street and cameras will hit you with facial recognition.
Hmm.
If they're looking for you, it won't take very long.
Yeah.
So they have a very strong police system. I mean, when COVID hit, the response was paramilitary.
Mm.
I mean, internally for them.
Right.
Why haven't they squashed it? But now our government leaned on them, right? Knocked this stuff off, right? So now they send the ingredients from China, go to Mexico or South America, and they just whip it up there and bring it across the border.
Hmm.
So if things weren't bad enough for people in South America, now they're given another thing to make
Right.
that's doing nobody no good.
It
That's
just more
good.
fuel to the fire.
It leads to the destruction of humanity and destruction of themselves too.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Is the root cause there the actual drug itself, or the lack of industry and agriculture in the
it
area?
degrades everything. I mean, can you imagine, young men, I mean, hopped up on meth and fentanyl
Hmm.
and doing multiple different drugs, running around with machine guns, and with their culture, the macho.
Right.
Yeah, hello.
I see.
That's a recipe for a lot of problems.
Regardless, a mentally unsound person with a weapon of any kind.
The thing is, I think that you're talking about the people that grew up super poor, and now they've gravitated into a lifestyle, and they're, it is what it is. I mean, but what I find interesting is the president of El Salvador, or the premier, or whatever his title is, has now got a relationship with the Trump administration.
Hmm.
We're setting prisoners. This is what leads me to this next piece of this conversation. Ecuador
Mm,
is looking to change laws to allow U.S. troops to come in. They want help.
that is interesting.
Okay, all right.
That-
Now the next piece of the puzzle, right? The new head of the Pentagon.
Hmm.
I don't want to butcher his name.
Oh, you talking about Hegseth or Heg?
Yes, that guy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
I haven't heard it out loud.
Yeah, that dude. Yeah, that guy. Oh, they're looking to shut down 30 bases worldwide.
Hmm.
Okay, so strategically, right? You got all this money freed up by Doge, all this money freed up by these different things. You're shutting these different things down, right?
Hmm.
Where would it make the most sense to put a military base? You have the Pacific Ocean on Atlantic on one side, and you have the Pacific on the other. Probably be a good spot to put a base.
In Ecuador?
Yeah, El Salvador
Hmm.
be probably another good spot. And at the same point in time, if you're trying to shut down drug production,
Yeah.
yeah, and you have to have heat to produce drugs,
Right.
right?
I
I
would
mean,
just
even if you
need.
put a complex out in the middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
it's still going to have a heat signature.
Right.
So it's not that hard to find if you have military Blackhawks.
Yeah, and with enough funding, military infrastructure, and abilities, and people and manpower, you could accomplish that goal of eliminating the cartels, which is why, or not just the cartels,
I don't think you can eliminate them. I think we'd be at war with them.
Yeah, that's essentially what it would come down to. So like the asking for help thing would have to have a clearly defined parameter to it. Like, what is help? What are we offering? What is our goal here? What's the end game involved here for us to go down there, other than just having a military installation there? So for me to be comfortable with that and not worry at all, I would need to know the exact game plan for us being there, if it does come to that, and what the Ecuadorian government actually wants from us specifically.
I think what they're looking for is exactly what any government would be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Something in return, most likely monetary.
Right.
Security, also probably trying to clean up a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at all the influx of immigrants that have been coming to the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and during the Biden administration, I mean, they were allowing millions of these people to come in,
Right.
right? And what are the main things all these people say? It's so violent, it's so deadly. I can't stay there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in fear of my life. I gotta go.
Right.
Right. Be a nice thing that they actually have a good lives in their own country.
Yeah, that would be nice. But at the same time, if the U.S. wants to bring manufacturing back, we're going to need manpower for that eventually. So again, immigration would be preferable.
Yeah, controlled immigration.
Yeah, and
Not where they're hopping across, or they're on an app.
yeah, I completely agree.
And logging into an app, and the next thing they run across the border, and
Mm-hmm.
and they have a little number or something says that they get an interview.
Yeah, I mean, the harder we make it for immigration to happen, for anybody to head further north, the more likely the scenario that you talked about is going to happen, where somebody has nowhere else to go and no other option than to join some sort of industry that requires violence.
Do you see the United States repositioning its power south?
I don't see a benefit to that currently, but
There's another thing that is part of the puzzle: the Panama Canal.
Right, yeah, but that costs more to run than anybody brings in.
No, actually, China started taking control of it.
Yeah, and you could control the physical transfer of trade and goods and agriculture and things like, not agriculture, but goods through the Panama Canal.
Mhm.
But as a nation running that, to me as a citizen, feels like there's already administrative controls in place that would make that redundant.
What happens if China got control of it? Because that's what they're trying to do.
I mean, it wouldn't be much different than any other country having control of the canal. Like, goods and trade still needs to happen.
I think China could use it as a tool.
Yeah, and I mean, if you limit the ability to do something, that's when innovation happens. So if there's no more Panama Canal, we're going to come up with something. The Panama Canal was literally a feat of human innovation. We needed to get from point A to point B in the shortest route possible. So what did we do? We made a canal.
Yeah.
No, that's literally human innovation. If we no longer have access to that, that's not really a threat to me. That's not really a problem. That's incentive to create
But it would inhibit trade.
Temporarily, for sure.
You don't see the recipe for us having small military conflicts. I can see that the cake mix is started.
I do too. I see it being possible, but that's, like I said, if things were to happen the way that they're supposed to happen, where we have a clearly defined goal and agenda and what we're offering, and we're not just going to swoop in and offer military aid, then that's a complex scenario that honestly, as far as South America goes, I don't know enough about, but I do see there being enough variables there for a military conflict or some sort of armed conflict if it continues this way.
In my opinion, only way to rid us of fentanyl, you're going to have to go off the manufacturers.
Yeah,
it's just not going to go away.
Yeah,
I don't think it's ever going to go away entirely, but I think that's what the administration is.
And that's true with
shifting the chips on the board.
Right. That's true with every drug throw, and that's like a common American talking point, is that the war on drugs in the U.S. has largely been more of a detriment than a gain for most people. So if we take that to other countries, if we look to history to see what could happen unless we change something, then it would just end up with more, violence. I definitely see the goal of wanting to eliminate that. But again, the goal would be to eliminate the need for it entirely and not the manufacturing of it itself. So like you said, a lot of people who go into those things, they don't have any other options. So to eliminate violent organizations and drug trade, it would make sense to increase the ability for people to make their own money. So industrialization and manufacturing and just bringing more economic prosperity to these countries where people don't have any other choice but to go into those types of trades, vocations, whatever you want to call them.
That's what the job market offers.
Yeah, exactly. So to eliminate
in those places,
and that's like trying to
whether
put
we
a
like it
Band-Aid
or
on a
not.
bullet
I mean, that's what
wound.
those people are living in.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, if we go in there and we offer military aid to eliminate,
I think military aid's not where we should go.
yeah, I agree.
I think that most likely what President Trump and his crew, they're looking at bringing like the American sword and having bases
Right.
there, and then we basically start ferreting out manufacturing and just bomb it.
Yeah, I mean, most of that stuff would end up weeding itself out on its own. If the goal is to help, let's say the goal is to help the people of South America, which in turn would help the U.S., the goal would be to bring manufacturing and economic prosperity to them. If they have that, that gives us more trade partners that are, in theory, indebted to us since we help them get there.
Also bring a market that would be more localized.
Exactly, and it's more freely controlled. And like you said, if we had a military base on, in Ecuador or something like that, that also establishes control in the region. But like I said, if we bring economic options to these places, then the drug problem would more or less disappear on its own. It's like, even in the US, whenever you look at regions, and even if you break it down to the smallest parts of a county or a city or a state or whatever, usually the areas with the highest drug problems are the lowest income areas, or at least in that region of the spectrum. So if you increase economic prosperity, the drug problem goes away.
I don't think if you increase prosperity in those regions, as long as you got groups of people that are making huge sums of money off this, right? They're entrenched. I mean, most of it, if you look at, I hear the word cartel. What does that mean? That means a group of like a board of directors, and there's a CEO. I mean,
that essentially
and they have their own paramilitary.
Yeah,
they don't fire people; they execute them.
And ultimately, their goal,
human resource department is nobody you want to meet. Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, and their goal is to make money, and it's like you said, back in the day,
they live by a code.
Yeah, and like the mafia used to be that way too. Mafia.
That's exactly.
And they eventually transitioned into
culture.
They eventually transitioned into being real businessmen because their goal was money.
So I would say the vast majority of them have.
Yeah. So to increase efficiency, eventually, if you want to keep making money in the easiest way possible, you eliminate the legalities of it. You make it legal. So to do that, you go from doing illegal mafia type stuff to being a legitimate businessman, and then there's no more need for the violence. So again, if you bring the economic options to people who are using that to make money, their goal, again, is to make money. So if you bring the option for them to make money in another way in similar volumes, they're most likely going to take it because it's less volatile.
The mafia actually helped out the U.S. against the Axis allies during the Second World War.
Really?
Yes, they did.
That's cool. How do they help?
Assassinations, intel gathering, and they did quite a bit of things.
Wow.
So
That sounds-
that's something that's not freely brought up, but the mafia did help out
Right.
during that time period.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
So-
I've heard very similar yet vague stories of certain cartels, down south as well, helping local communities. But again, that's
I'll
bringing
back
money.
that up for a second. They do,
Mm-hmm.
because they do, because they quite a few of them give back.
Right.
But the problem is, it's nobody have a problem with it if the product wasn't killing people.
Yeah.
Or turning people into zombies.
Yeah, and that's the crux of the problem.
The problem
drug
is the product,
problem.
not them.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd have never delved into any of that kind of history because it's like, well, what is this doing to people?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's the devil's tool is what it is in my book.
For sure.
So no thanks.
Yeah, there's no real benefit to it on the product itself, but the money it brings in helps a ton of people. So again, their goal is to improve their livelihood and their standing.
Well,
through
that too,
money.
and have a pretty big mansion.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
lot of cool cars too.
I mean, what American doesn't want a big mansion and cool cars?
That's usually most entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So, all right. So you don't see the recipe here for us all of a sudden.
I definitely see the recipe
Because I think we're in love with Afghanistan's and Vietnam's.
Right. I mean, Americans love something to hate. We need a bad guy. That's something to focus on.
My prediction is that I think that we're going to see more of a U.S. military presence, and I guarantee way more of a paramilitary police force of U.S. in South America.
Mm.
The DA had huge problems down there. They tried to get the local governments to prop up the Colombian government, this government, that government. That didn't work.
Right.
But I mean, because what was it? The Colombian Senate or Colombian there's a building. This is, I think, back in the 80s or the early 90s. It was laid siege by the cartels. Some guy was on trial,
Mm.
and they were a little bit upset.
Mm-hmm.
So they attacked it. They attacked the building,
Jeez.
and it would look like something like right out of like a paramilitary force,
Mm-hmm.
attacking local government.
Right.
It was no joke. It was like it was game on.
I mean, that's essentially the American Revolution, right? We all have guns to eventually fight off a tyrannical
Well,
government.
That's one time that in America's history that guerrilla warfare worked for us. We were the ones doing the guerrilla warfare against the Brits.
Yeah, the first American Rangers were guerrilla warfare fighters.
Yeah, I mean, the Brits would line up in a gentleman's line, standard warfare,
Mm-hmm.
drop to a knee, and the row in the back would. By that time, they picked off half of them.
And that's another example of facing an opposition and using innovation to defeat it.
Well, war's not a pretty thing.
No, it's not.
I mean, in your book, how could we defeat fentanyl coming into the United States? It's mainly it's South America as the manufacturer now.
Right now, they're making the most money that they can make off of fentanyl. So what do we do is either decrease the value of fentanyl or give them a product that has more value and is easier to produce. That would be the essential goal, because again, their goal is to make money.
So your take would be to negotiate with them and cut a deal.
I mean, not necessarily even that. Like, we wouldn't have to go to the cartels at all, or the people manufacturing or running fentanyl. All we would need to do is bring industry, not even us, but allow the option for them to develop their own industry. So that would just be sending some sort of aid or support. I don't know much about South America or the problems that they deal with, what their economic situations are, but I do know that for the most part, when an industry thrives, when an economy thrives, crime rates drop. That tends to be how it is. The higher income you have, the less crime there is.
I think they'd be like saying, in my opinion, that you have a successful car manufacturer, and because you make the economy much better, that car manufacturer is going to go away.
That's supply and demand. That's just the crux of capitalism. If nobody wants it, nobody's going to buy it.
I think that if you made it so hard, I think there's a twofold solution. One, in the United States, you force people into rehab.
Mm.
Okay, they get voluntary or they get forced. voluntary. They walk in, they just put their drugs down, they walk in, they get some rehab longer than 6 days or 3 days, which doesn't work. and then we stick with them. We bring our fathers, mothers, and sons and daughters, and our basically our family back to us, right? Get them off this poison. And the other thing too is stop the manufacturing down south. And if you did something like that, you did a twofold solution at the same time. I think that's common sense,
right?
So,
like it or not, it's a huge part of their economy. So something would have to take its place.
It's a mammoth part of their economy.
Yeah, so something would have to take its place if we remove it entirely. Not us, but if it gets removed, it needs to be replaced. And just in general, as an economy, if we stop producing something that makes money for us, something has to take its place to make money as well. So again, it's the problem would be that, but the solution lies after eliminating the problem to make sure that the problem doesn't come back.
What's your opinion on a twofold solution?
Twofold solution would be some way eliminating the problem, which would be the economic need for the problem.
You're decreasing the customer base, and also you're disrupting the manufacturing and the chain of supply.
It does come down to supply and demand. If you eliminate the demand for it, then the supply limits itself entirely, because having a surplus of supply is just wasted money.
The other thing too is you decrease the amount of manufacturing, the price will shoot up, and that'll help decrease the demand.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So that does just come back around to supply and demand, which it feels very like high school economics whenever you say it, but again, that is what the economy is based off of.
True. What other topics in the news do you?
We talked about the dire wolf thing.
Yeah. Did you look into that a little bit?
I did, and it's very interesting, somewhat sensationalist and misleading in the headlines, but it's super cool that they're able to do that. Like they took was it like a 10,000-year-old tooth, yeah, a piece of DNA
and
from that.
I do believe a 73,000-year-old jawbone.
Yeah.
Or skull.
Right, and they were able to find a sequence of DNA that they can splice into modern gray wolves to make them look closer to dire wolves. Essentially, it's like I don't want to diminish the effect of it because it is impressive, but it's essentially like a designer puppy, more or less, because it's not
a big puppy.
Yeah, it's not a dire wolf, but right now there's no DNA that currently exists that we have the technology to fully sequence and recreate dire wolves, so we couldn't be able to clone them. But it's super cool to see that we have now gray wolves mixed with dire wolves.
But here's the catch: if they make more of them and they mate, and then the gene sequence continues on, you have a species.
Yeah, that's essentially evolution. You introduce a new evolutionary chain to the line, it's going to develop.
Yeah, that's a new species.
Yeah.
They're looking at doing woolly mammoths.
That would be crazy. What would they mix it with? Just regular elephants?
Using elephants. Okay. And the elephant would give birth to the surrogate.
Right.
First couple, and then they would go from there. They put the gene in a woolly mammoths in mice and made them like woolly mice.
Woolly mice?
I saw a video of it.
Like a mouse with tusks?
It was faked, but the other thing they're looking at is bringing back the Tasmanian devil. Okay. And then the dodo bird.
That's just goofy. That's just someone's passion project.
Not only a passion project. Can you imagine going to a zoo and there's stuff there from the Ice Age that's alive, that's living, you can look at?
That's super cool. That would be a very high demand.
A dire wolf, height-wise, is 4 feet. So compared to where that door handle is at, that's a pretty big puppy, Jay.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and it's a wolf.
I thought they were
which means
bigger than
it has its instincts are to rip your throat out and eat you.
Right.
So it's a hunter.
Man, freaking dire wolves, man. Why a dire wolf? Did they just happen to have that?
That's a good question, why they picked that, or maybe that was just something easy for them to work with, or easier.
Yeah.
But they talked about that. But it leads me to the next part of this conversation, right? Where you could have a military spin on this whole thing. Let's say you had somebody who's a super successful soldier, right? Remember Star Wars: The Clone Wars? And that one, was it not Boba Fett, the original version?
Oh, was it Django?
Yeah, I think that was. Yeah. And they kept cloning him, right? I don't think this is too far-fetched now.
That's been in the human imagination for like a century
Oh,
now.
I don't think it's imagination anymore.
That's the thing. It's like for some reason that's been in our psyche for so long, and now that we're actually getting closer to it, it's both exciting and terrifying, because at the same time we have a lot of really cool stories about, cloning and stuff, and then we also have scary things like, being able to clone an entire army, which sounds cool but is actually terrifying.
I mean, you see somebody has like, superior genetic traits. They can shoot better. They're stronger. It would, you basically, you raise yourself a crop of baby soldiers.
Mm.
I mean, and you just train them. And you have like this elite force.
Yeah.
I don't think that sounds so far-fetched now.
It sounds possible, but I would question who would do it, who would have the authority to do it.
Who thought that that this company would whip up a dire wolf?
Yeah,
And when I saw that on my feed, I was like, what?
And to clarify, it's a gray wolf with traits of a dire wolf, and it was a privately run company that came up with it. Like,
yeah.
For it to come down to the super scary possibility of developing super soldiers, what private company would be able to do that?
I think they could.
Because you would need to be able to, one, sequence those specific genes and splice them into either human babies, which we all know how Americans feel about babies, which we don't want anything bad to happen to them.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be the United States doing it. Think about other powers around the world.
Oh.
Yeah,
that just got
this technology's out of the bag is what I'm getting at.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, somebody now has put a footprint on, the possibility of landing on planet clone.
So just its potential is scary, especially in the wrong hands.
Yeah, the potential AI is terrifying.
Yeah.
You tell a computer to do something and it says, you know what? I don't think that'd be a good idea for you.
Mm-hmm.
And until it basically disobeys a command.
Yeah.
The name of the company, Toby, is the name of the company Colossus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
This is because I have was a sci-fi kid. There was a movie called The Forbin Project.
Mm.
I saw it when I was a child. It freaked me out. And basically, this computer became sentient and starts talking with a computer in the Soviet Union,
mm-hmm.
and they were talking to each other about not destroying, the course correction for humanity,
mm-hmm.
not destroying humanity, and the connection was broken. And the one here in the United States starts threatening to blow up American cities and blow stuff up if it's not linked with its Russian counterpart. And then its demands were maniacal and just like no soul to it whatsoever.
Mm.
And but the name of the computer was Colossus.
And this one is Colossal.
Colossal.
Double check.
Oh man.
Okay, so
there has to be a connection.
Maybe somebody at a board meeting, had a flashback to when they were a kid.
Right.
That sounds like I'll just change it just a little bit, but still, it has this ominous presence to it,
mm-hmm.
to the name. But you don't see a potential or a real problem. I mean, you can gene edit. You can like say, for example, trees or plants that went extinct during the last ice age.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any problem for them to bring those back.
Yeah, I don't know enough about what goes into gene sequencing and what's required for it.
It's CRISPR editing technologies,
Yeah.
gene editing.
I know like the general overview for it, but I don't know what would be required for each individual species, because you would need some sort of, I assume, compatible DNA. Like we're like 98.8% genetically similar to, was it monkeys? Some form of monkey, but we're
chimpanzees.
Yeah, chimpanzees, but we're radically different in appearance, behavior, and function. This is a good one for you, where I think 80 or 82% comparable to house cats. Oh yeah. Aren't we like really comparable to pigs too? Certain types of pigs we have a lot
yes, which is kind of freaky.
So if we have that level of genetic compatibility, in theory, we could introduce either genetic human traits to pigs or pig traits to humans, which I don't know what human would volunteer for that.
Okay, kind of disgusting. We're supposed to be upgrading.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying it's potential. We got to look at every direction.
You want to go sticking a hood ornament on, on a Yugo.
If we want to know the full capability of it, we got to question everything that it can do.
Kind of blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, and then what's funny is one of my friend's kids, he's 8, and he goes, well, they can probably bring back dinosaurs, but
We have a movie about that.
we have a movie about that. But honestly, think about it. If they were actually able to find any type of material that was sequenced enough, they could probably splice it back into. You have Komodo dragons.
Mm.
That's pretty much looks pretty dinosaur-like to me.
It's pretty much the closest thing we have.
Saltwater crocodiles are, you know, pretty dinosaurish.
True. What about like a great white shark? They're literally like billions of years old, never needed to evolve.
Yeah, but they do live birth. They don't. Anything that lays an egg,
Oh.
you have to find something that lays an egg. Rhinos give live birth. They don't do eggs.
Oh, I didn't know that. I did not
Yeah.
know that.
Chickens are the closest relative to T-Rex. So, which is kind of comical,
Right.
but at
Would
the
we
same,
use that to make giant chickens or chickens with teeth? Or would we even know?
Actually, you know what would be funny if you think about it from the food production perspective? What happens if you did make a chicken that was 6 feet tall?
Mm.
You
Feed a lot of people.
feed a lot of people. I mean, and probably an incredibly dangerous animal.
Yeah, for sure.
Eats like just slugs down worms and bugs.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the same size, you just most raptors will have it. They just tear flesh and
Yeah. I mean, we hunted buffalo to near extinction, and they're large enough to kill a human.
Yeah, they made a pretty good comeback. I mean, because we leaned off of them.
Mm-hmm.
But do you see? I mean, don't you see some ways this could be used nefariously?
Oh, of course. I mean, any sort of innovative technology can be used for nefarious means, depending on who's using it and what their motives are. Like, definitely, like you brought up the whole super soldier aspect. You know, it can be used in that regard. It can be used to genetically modify food in some way that makes humans reliant on that, and say a private organization owns it. This is purely conspiratorial. Say a private
you make food addictive?
Yeah.
Who would ever thought of such a thing?
Exactly.
Like you make a drink that's bubbly and fizzy,
Right.
and next thing you know, you can't get enough of it per day.
Yeah, and like this, I mean, this is apples and oranges, but say you're able to like somehow make chickens naturally produce an insane amount of nicotine. You know, that's like insanely addictive food right there. And it's super easy to produce because the brain already has nicotine receptors in it. So there's nothing needed. You just add nicotine to a product. And that's a nefarious goal. Lots of positives, but also crap tons of negatives if people have the creativity for it.
We talked about doing it with humans, but at the same point in time, there was a guy over in China. He got 3 years in Chinese prison for this. And a doctor did gene editing. He made 2 babies that cannot catch AIDS or HIV.
Really?
He gene edited them so they can't catch it.
How?
Simians, like chimpanzees and primates, can't get AIDS. They can carry it.
Okay.
But they don't manifest
Right.
immune system disorder.
That's why it goes from AIDS to HIV.
Yeah.
Like advanced,
Well, HIV is the virus itself.
Yeah.
AIDS is a syndrome
Right.
that basically it's your own immune system is attacking itself and shutting itself down, and then everything else gets you.
Yeah.
After that, and you're done. So he did that with 2 children with this type of technology that they're using, and you hit the nail on the head about traits. How about if you're a super wealthy couple and you wanted to have 2 beautiful daughters, long black hair, blue eyes? Okay.
It's just designer humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a novel called Brave New World. It's made into a movie, and that's exactly what it was. It was genetically enhanced, genetically modified human beings, alphas, betas, C class, D class. And that's what they did. They basically just kept cloning the human race.
Right. And that's, I mean, just hearing the whole class system, that's already automatically a stratified system in humans. So that's
pretty much.
That's just, that's a negative possibility, I would say. Especially if there's an upper class and a lower class. And I assume in the lower class is the one fronting most of the labor. And
the D class, they designed them so they were 3 feet tall and they could fit in tubes of nuclear reactors. Again, this was a sci-fi. I do believe this was written in the 40s or the 50s. And that's what the writer envisioned at that time. There's another favorite movie of mine, Blade Runner.
Right.
Okay, basically you're taking flesh attached to an actual robotic skeletal structure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination
Mm-hmm.
of living and machine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all genetically created everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you're giving it traits or you're designing it.
Right.
So in my book, the dire wolf thing is a lot more than what meets the eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
So when you read up on it, is basically it's a gray wolf with dire wolf traits.
more or less, yes.
So in other words, it'd be like a dire wolf that hooked up with a gray wolf and had a puppy.
But I mean, yeah, more or less, yeah.
Oh,
So
in other words, it's half dire wolf.
it's a hybrid as far as the percentage of it goes. I don't know if it's half or not, but it's definitely a hybrid.
Well, usually when people from one ethnic race and another ethnic race have children,
Mm-hmm.
you see traits of both races.
Right.
But that dire wolf looks like a dire wolf.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like, because
The-
also with passing down genetic traits, you can get like 70% genome from a certain trait and then 30% of another. So it could be similar here. That's just me nitpicking though.
And did it say in the article you read how long they've been working on this? Because this came out of the clear blue. It's like, hey, look, we got some puppies.
It might have, but I don't recall the actual amount of time. But I know they've been working on genetic sequencing, like CRISPR and stuff like that, for several years now.
CRISPR's been around for a long time now.
Yeah, so genetic sequencing and modification has been the thing for a while. The direwolf specifically, that just seems like somebody's random little project that they just were like, this would be cool, let's try it.
We'll know when they grow up. If they grow to 4 feet tall, yeah, that's kind of the dire wolf trait.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, that's like saying if you take a human baby and we introduced a couple of traits of this dictator, that like Hitler, and the kid grows up and he looks exactly like Hitler, but it's not Hitler, or you have like somebody who's like, again, countries that are willing to push the envelope. Let's say you wanted to be in the Olympics, and you wanted some super athletes that that were amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and you just basically use genetic coding from a super athlete, and you introduce it into a zygote,
Mm-hmm.
right? The egg, and then you do some splicing with daddies as well before that happens, and you end up with a super athlete. And then all of a sudden you've got like a crop of them, and look, our country won the Olympics hands down.
Right.
No steroids included.
That would be precedent setting. I'm sure after that there'd be some sort of regulation.
It kind of reminds me of Star Trek, like what happened in Star Trek with the eugenics wars.
Oh, I remember you telling me about this. Yeah.
And, they made superhumans super ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you could get the traits out of like something that was dug out of the dirt from 10,000 and 73,000 years ago. And am I correct on the 73,000?
But I just looked up chimpanzees. Chimpanzees have 98.9%
Yeah, I knew it.
of human traits.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same DNA. I mean, that's almost as much as us. So
Yep.
with the same concept, could Colossal do this with chimpanzees?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
Oh yeah, this is what I'm getting at, everybody.
yeah.
I mean, there was a Russian scientist, right? And this back in I think the 20s and the 30s, he wanted to combine human and chimpanzee to make a human chimp. And his thing was to make laborers.
Why is it always something like that? Why is it always like some slave workforce?
Yeah, back to the D class,
Mm-hmm.
right? That science fiction story.
Yeah.
There's your D class. But with this technology, you could easily, like, before the kid's born, you grab the mother's egg, and you introduce these spliced traits in that you want. Well, I would like my kid to be super smart, and I want our son to be 6'4", 285, lean, no immune to HIV, which has been proven that's possible. This Chinese guy did it, the doctor did it, and also with other traits that are spliced in that are superior human traits, and all of a sudden you end up with a super kid. And the tooth was from
72,000 years.
Oh, 72,000 years ago.
Jeez.
It's
Yeah,
like
now think,
yeah.
now let's ponder that for a minute. 72,000 years from now, somebody digs up my skull and, wants to recreate another me.
Mm-hmm.
They could do it with and it wouldn't be, exactly like me, but they drop the traits in.
Mm-hmm.
And just like what Toby brought up, which is scary to me, right? Taking a chimpanzee and dropping human traits in there. And next thing you've got like a chimpanzee that's smart enough to, sit at some, workstation and make things all day long. I do believe that they have the equivalency of a toddler.
Yeah.
A toddler with the strength of,
Yeah.
2.5 men.
It's just a way to get around child labor laws.
It'd be heinous, in my opinion, but it opens the door up. It proves to me that you can do it.
Right. Why is the default assumption always that we're going to do something negative with this stuff? I mean, history has proven that to be the case more often than not.
When Marie Curie discovered radioactivity, that was I do believe the 1890s or 1880s,
right,
somewhere in there. And in 1944 or 45, we detonated the first nuclear device.
Yeah.
That was a leap of like 65 years.
Oh yeah.
One generation. And next thing you know, they figure out how to not use it for a good purpose, but as a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The growth of technology has always been exponential, and we've always found a way to use it to do
what
harm.
would be cheaper, making robots or making designer people?
I don't know yet. How much did it cost to make the dire wolf puppy?
Probably, if you do it on mass production scale, probably not much.
Right. I mean, I guess in theory, they already have puppy mills. You can just produce a crap ton of puppies and then introduce those genes, and then boom, you have new ones. So probably is cheaper to do that than to build robots.
Or you give people genetic traits that they're stronger, they're resistant to cold, they can't catch COVID-19, they're immune to it, they can't catch HIV. You see where you could split,
right,
use it for these things. You make a new version of humanity.
Yeah. I would just like to know like the potential ramifications for other genes here, because you can't do something and expect no consequence in some way somewhere else. So like if you make somebody 6'4", maybe they have like super thin bones or something. Like it's just, there's got to be a consequence somewhere for this type of stuff, right? It just makes sense.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how the dire wolves grow up.
If they can even reproduce or not. Because like
ligers, my money bet is they'll be able to reproduce.
Like ligers, like lions and tigers, that a liger couldn't reproduce.
This is a little bit different. This is, they're going to the tree of life.
Right.
That's how I said the tree of life. You can actually look this up in ancient, scripts, and you'll see a tree of life. It actually looks like RNA, DNA.
Oh,
right?
The double
and
helix.
They're going to right there, and they're actually splicing in exactly what needs to be there, and taking out what they don't want. It still brings you back right full circle back to, like, okay, not maybe with humans, but let's go with another version of this. It's proven that you can make a dire wolf. How about a designer German Shepherd? How about if we take the hip dysplasia gene and make a new lineage of German Shepherds that don't have the hip disease? Or we make a dog that doesn't have this problem. Or also now you're making designer dogs.
Right. But I mean, that gene itself was a consequence of another gene developing in some way.
Yeah. But where I'm going with this, it's opened the door.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
That's where I'm going. And in some aspects, I think that it's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
For sure. Yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah. What happens if you took this is kind of like the Khan from Star Trek kind of thing, but if you took somebody who was super ambitious and you had, traits of theirs, and you introduced it into, a human zygote, right, to the egg, and next to you, you have a kid that grows up as super ambitious,
Hmm.
just wired to be that way.
Right.
And then you want that's your next dictator for your country. You're grooming your next leader.
Yeah. I mean, ambitious is it's a general term. Maybe the kid will be ambitious to like set the world record in eating Doritos. I see what you mean, though. Yeah, the potential is scary.
I can see that too.
Like it can go both ways. Like where there's one effect, there's an opposite effect somewhere. So it's
But
a moot point.
so I don't know. When you read up on it, how did you feel about when you were reading up on it?
First, I felt misled because of the sensationalist headline about it being a direwolf pup. When, like you said, it's a gray wolf pup that has direwolf traits. So off the bat, that source was untrustworthy to me. But there weren't many other sources on the topic. But other than that part, which was just a way to make extra money and bring attention to them, other than that, the actual technological development I found very exciting.
It just blew me away because usually about companies like this, you hear about they're working on it or they're leading up to it. They just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, we're finally at that point.
No, we made them.
Right.
Yeah, here they are. Look, they're howling, and now they're here.
Yeah.
And I just was just like, wow.
What's going to be the next headline?
I think that the next headline is going to be a woolly mammoth.
That'd be so cool. I'm personally interested in the woolly mouse you were talking about. I really want to see that.
Toby, can you Google that? Just to see.
That's a logo on a T-shirt right there. The woolly mouse.
Woolly mouse.
That's just crazy.
There it is.
What?
Yep, there it is. See it?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's what that's gene editing.
That's adorable. Why didn't they talk about that? You could market that. You could sell that.
Jay, it's kind of like, I mean, you made a mouse that's got like a bunch of fur all over it.
That's adorable.
Yeah, that's a mouse built for the tundra.
Yeah. Oh yeah. True.
Evolution does its thing, and God has a purpose for everything, right? But that looks like something like it just jumped right out of the ice age.
Yeah. Seriously.
It does.
I'm disappointed there's no tusks, but there's always next
give
time.
them some time. They'll drop it in there, right? A woolly mammoth gene dropped into a mouse,
right?
And an elephant and a mammoth have nothing to do with a mouse.
Yeah,
But there it is.
Yep.
Okay. How about if you had a gene trait where people live longer? You could splice it in before they're conceived.
Like a great white shark that lives like 500 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or lobsters, aren't lobsters like functionally immortal? Like they don't die unless they kill them.
There's a version of a jellyfish that is immortal.
Yeah.
It just keeps, like, it dies, or it's going to die, then it recycles itself, and then it comes right back, and it just keeps going.
That's so cool. Or what if we can somehow produce a human that doesn't require oxygen? We can just freely roam around space, eliminate the need for an entire system in a spacecraft.
I don't think you're going to be able to pull that one off because everything on the planet runs on like that.
Right now, it's a what-if scenario.
But you could come up with a human that runs on less oxygen.
Yeah. Or even just solar energy, make it like Superman, just dive into the sun.
The other genetic traits, you're basically whipping up a bunch of Einsteins, Hawkings.
Right.
I mean, the designer baby, I want my kid to be, uber smart.
At
IQ
that point,
of 185.
At that point, I'm assuming
athletic.
It's all super wealthy people that can do that.
I don't think that this technology we're talking about, I don't think it's very far-fetched at all.
No, not that. Yeah, I definitely think it's possible. Although being widely accessible to everyone, I don't know.
Well, you know what? At one point in time, somebody came up with the combustion motor, and then it was widely accessible in 25 years afterwards?
Yeah.
The steam motor was popped up for manufacturing. Next thing, you can use it for, trains and all kinds of cool stuff.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I guess that brings up a lot of other questions too about eugenics and genetic modifications and ethics and morals on the set. Like if everybody had access to it, then where's the line?
I think that's where I'm going with this thing is I don't know, that I can see a lot of ways to do this. A lot of ways to do it. Or, for example, like say if you have somebody who has a family member that passes away, right? A child or something like that, It's horrific. And we want our new child to look exactly like the child we lost.
I mean,
and that's 100% plausible.
right. I have many mixed feelings on that topic. I don't know how to vocalize them.
You see where it's kind of like stepping on
Yeah, that's morally
on the toes of God.
like I'm not a religious guy, but I can definitely see the just from a moral and principle standpoint, like that feels like a potential robbing of choice and personhood before a person's even actually a person, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add before we conclude?
Not at this point, no. I had a comment way earlier on, but it doesn't matter anymore.
Wait a minute, you dropped the comment now.
Well, it was more like just it's going back to our first original topic about tariffs and trade and everything. One is like there's a reason why there's a distinction between fair and equal. Fair, it does not mean equal. Equal means equal. So like what's fair for one person is not fair for another. So like a salesperson getting a 10% commission on a sale would be considered fair, even though the company gets 90% of the money on that sale. You know, that's technically fair. That's not equal, but it's fair. So that was my comment earlier on in tariffs, is the misconception about what fair and equal means.
Well, you always, whenever you have splits of commissions, you always have the burdens of the company, like taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it fair. 10% commission versus 90% to the
10%, trust me, is quite a good chunk.
Yeah, that was just a random round number.
Especially you have profit ratios that are only 20 and 30%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you have 10% like...
And those are the factors that go into whether or not something is fair versus equal. So that was my comment.
All right.
I'm good to go now.
Good to go? Got off your chest?
Yeah, I'm good. That was bothering me.
This is John. Thank you for watching American Enlightenment. Interesting topics today. I've got some very interesting episodes coming up in a week or two. Stay tuned.